Look at the light shining down on. Oh, and look at two-stroke. And with that two-stroke motorbike thing passing by, we know we could only be in one neighborhood in New York. That's Williamsburg. Hello and welcome to Carspotting. We're here in Williamsburg. We're in the hipster capital of New York. We're going to go see some very interesting cars that are hipster appropriate, but they put in the work and they really slaved for it. Let's go check them out. Cha! It's cold here in New York. I think this is our first day that's under 50. Everyone's in a bad mood, but I'm not, because we have found a variety of interesting cars. Actually, I found these the other night, and I convinced Aaron, our cameraman, to come out to Williamsburg to see them. This Rambler American. Let's take this thing in. Many of you will think it's interesting that we get cars like the Ford Fiesta or the Mini Cooper now. This is sort of like the first premium small car that argued that people would buy a small car based on it being something that they want to buy rather than just a smaller car that they could afford. Introduced in, I guess, designed in the late 40s and introduced in the very early 50s. But this one, you can tell, is a 1958 to 1960 model. Rambler was a car thinking that the economy would be real grim. Metal would be, I guess, not rationed, but there would be supply shortages and strict quotas on how much metal could be used. So they figured we could make money not by competing straight on with the big three and making large cars, but we could sell something that they weren't, which is a premium small car. They got slightly bigger and bigger through the 1950s until 1958. The guy who was running Rambler died. The guy who took over the company was none other than Mitt Romney's dad, George Romney, and he brought back the smaller old platform which they'd sort of given up on. And so they called it the American. This one is a custom American. This was actually an American restyling of an Italian design. Pininfarina styled the early Ramblers, and they looked really gaudy. They were like huge fronts, and so it was an American who toned down the Italian design, which I find very funny. If I'm not mistaken, I once saw this thing out in a different neighborhood of Brooklyn, which I would love to get to. But it's been parked here for, I think it's been parked here for a little while, so it may be getting work done here at Joe's, I'm not sure. Super cool though, am I right? Classic city car. I will also point out that we are in Williamsburg, and we have the classic Williamsburg icon, the fixed gear bicycle. But as a sign of the times, the fixie days of Williamsburg are over. Nobody's riding fixies anymore, and you can tell this one's been hanging out for really quite some time. Even the pedals have been stolen. It would be terrible for me not to mention this 60 series Land Cruiser. This was the 1980s one. They produced it, I think, exactly from 1980 to 1990. The last time I saw this thing driving around, not that I know literally every car in New York personally and individually, I believe this is owned by a film crew, or it has something to do with filming. Perhaps if the owners watch this video and they go, oh no, those were just my buddies who were shooting a film at the time a couple years ago, that's fine. It's neither here nor there. Anyway, these things are super cool. They're still undervalued for how awesome Land Cruisers are. Before you get to the 90s one, this is sort of like the last big boxy 80s one. I think they're awesome. Look at these huge hubs. Huge! Giant! It's massive hubs. Hubs of great size. Holy shit. See, it is insane to me that this car is parked on the street. It's at a busy intersection. This is what it's like to own a car in New York. You can't, it's insane what you have to put up with. Look at this scene. Take this in. God. This is what people move here for. Look at this. There's a guy fixing a cool old sign. In 5 weeks, when this becomes worth $10 million and this all gets bulldozed, we'll really miss it. We're now briefly going to hunt two more cars. Welcome to the depository of Williamsburg's more interesting vehicles. This gigantic lot thing under the BQE. And we're very briefly going to look at two cars because we have to get back to work. The first of which being this Mercury Mountaineer. These weren't Mountaineers, were they? It's a Mercury. Were these a Mariner? Was this a... jeez. Oh, my God. This is terrible. I can't even remember what they called it. It was either the Mariner or the Mountaineer, but the thing is, both of those were used on other models. You say Mariner. It sounds real right. Anyway, this is a Datsun 210. This I love because everyone talks about how, like, in the 1970s, Japanese cars came into America and they were just so sporty and exciting and good handling in comparison to the floaty American cars. And like that may have been true of like a Honda. The Datsuns of the day were extremely conservative cars that had like nicely overwrought styling. This is often referred to as sort of like the ugliest era of Datsun design, this being a mid to late 70s one. I think they're kind of neat. It just doesn't get more 70s than this. This is a manual. Look at this, the window treatment. This is so, Look at this, you still had like the trim. And yellow. Yellow's a good color for cars. Look at Datsun. There's a theme, like a yearish theme that we're seeing a lot of 70s stuff around. That's just sort of the Williamsburg vibe. Here's our last one. We're going vanning. This is owned by a guy who works just across the street. I was just talking to him right before we filmed this. If you're wondering, hey, I wonder if a guy who looks like Lemmy from Motorhead with long hair and at least one face tattoo owns this thing, you are correct. That is exactly who owns this vehicle. I think he works at a tattoo shop. I can't say for sure. Anyway, this is a Chevy van. It was a classic custom van, vanner's van, 1970s van culture van, vanning. Here's a pigeon who is stealing my shine. Look at that beautiful little bird. Just getting through the day. It's cold as hell out there, bird. All right, let's look at this. Let's look at this sick-ass van, how it's been customized. If I can just squeeze in between. Not used to doing this with a backpack. We're really getting this in. Look at this. We've got our portholes. You've got our nice little trim. And then we have this lovely front end. This is a 1970s Chevy van. You can tell because it's got this lovely front on it. I think you're supposed to be able to tell what year it is specifically based on whether or not this was a blue or yellow front. But all this stuff gets customized because vans are freaking great to customize. And they became super popular in the 70s just for that reason. You can do absolutely anything with them. You can get a V8 up front. You can basically have a room in the back. You can put some curtains up. You can live in it. You can turn it into a fishing vehicle. Whatever, man. And they're sick and they're super cool. And yeah, so they fit the vibe 100%. I went and saw a van club in Portland that was full of these things. And I was like, these guys are geniuses. They're cheap to buy, cheap to run, and just about like the best deal you can get. As we try not to get run over. Man. Good cars. All right, thanks for tuning in for Carspotting. This has been Williamsburg. We saw some interesting cars parked on the street, living real lives. Now we understand them a little bit better. And yeah, stay tuned for next week. We're going to see some more interesting cars, hopefully a quieter neighborhood. As ever, send in tips to tips@jalopnik.com. You see a cool car parked on the street. Bye. Oh, there's our train. Are we filming this? Are we rolling? Look at this disappointment. God.